Welcome to the 40th meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Status of Women. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Monday, October 31st, the committee will commence its study of women and girls in sport. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person and in the room remotely using the Zoom application. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen for either French, English, or floor. And for those in the room, you can use your earpiece, so your earpiece, which is attached to your microphone, and you can choose your language there as well. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking list as best as we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. In accordance with our routine motion, I am informing you that the committee, that our witness, with the exception, all of our witnesses, with the exception of Leah Clermont-Dion, has completed the connection test in advance of this meeting. There's lots to read, sorry. Before we welcome our witnesses, I would like to provide this trigger warning. This will be a very difficult study. We'll be discussing experiences related to abuse. This may be triggering to viewers, members, staff, or anyone with similar experiences. If you feel distressed or if you need help, please advise the clerk. I would now like to welcome our first panelist for today. As an individual and online, we have Leah Clermont-Dion, who is the producer, author, and political scientist. From Global Athlete, we have Rob Cooler, and Cooler is the way I say it properly? Keeler. And he is the Director General of Global Athlete. And for Gymnasts for Change Canada, Amelia Klein, lawyer and co-founder, and Kim Shar, co-founder. What we'll be doing is we'll be providing everybody 5 minutes for opening statements. We're going to be rather flexible here, so just kind of watch myself as the chair. We'll be flexible. But what I'll be doing is, do we have the check done yet for her or no? She does not have the headset. Okay. We're going to start with a sound check, if you don't mind. I'm going to pass it over for a sound check to Leah. Leah, if you can work with our clerk right now.
Oui, bonjour. Alors, est-ce que vous m'entendez bien? Est-ce que le son est bon? Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Moi, j'entends un petit peu le son ne sera pas bon pour les interprètes. Est-ce que vous avez votre casque d'écoute?
Non, parce que je voulais aller le chercher, mais malheureusement, j'étais pas là le vendredi quand je l'ai reçu. Alors, voilà.
Est-ce que vous avez un autre casque d'écoute autre que des écouteurs?
Oui, une seconde.
OK.
Une seconde.
What we'll be doing is we will be starting with our next witnesses. So I'm going to pass it over to Rob. Rob, I'm going to provide you 5 minutes for your opening statements. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear members of the committee. In no way is my testimony today to negate the positive experiences that athletes and children across Canada have taken from sport. I would further appeal to those athletes that have had a positive experience to listen, observe, and become allies of survivors of abuse. We at Global Athlete have directly and indirectly heard from athletes in the sports of gymnastics, soccer, bobsleigh, skeleton, athletics, cross-country ski, water polo, swimming, artistic swimming, boxing, canoe kayak, rowing, and figure skating. Their lived experiences must be listened to, must be taken into account, and these evil behaviors that surround sport must be removed. The fact that athletes have turned to Global Athlete and not the current system should speak volumes. Athletes fear and do not trust the sports system. Under the current framework, it's been terrifying and traumatizing for athletes to come forward. They have all brave survivors, and as leader of this country, we need to make sure that abusers and enablers are made accountable for their actions. The current sports system has dramatically failed athletes. For almost a year, Canadian athletes have been loud, and they've been mostly ignored. until today. And we thank you for that. This is the first step to answer their calls for a third-party, independent judicial investigation across the toxic culture of abuse in Canadian sport. Make no mistake, abuse in sport is a global one. Canada now has the opportunity to be leaders where they were in the Dublin Inquiry and change the culture of sport in Canada. The Dublin Inquiry removed the right for sporting organization to test their own athletes. It's time to take abuse in a similar fashion. Human rights and child rights must be at the center of this change. Over the past year, Global Athlete has been inundated with lived experiences of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse that has not been met with adequate remedy. Canadian athletes and their sport organizations have failed them. All you have to do is look in the media. Athletes are actually taking lawsuits against their own sporting organizations because they have failed to act. This speaks volumes why sport cannot be trusted to regulate itself. Abuse in sport is a human rights issue, not a sport issue. Abusers recognize the power imbalance that leaves athletes powerless and coaches and administrators the almighty powerful. Athletes have shared lived experiences with me that have ripped my heart apart. And I know they do the same for you. The lack of action and desire to meaningfully tackle these complaints is disturbing and without doubt borderline negligent. The lived experiences are heavy. The least we can do is listen, assist, and advocate for justice and change. Every victim of abuse needs justice to heal. I will not get into the details of the abuse that I've heard from select athletes, but I will provide some common themes shared by them. Athletes do not trust the sport system or sport administrators to operate and act in their best interest. Athletes and parents fear retribution. And when they do speak up, retribution becomes real. Sport has silenced athletes for years. Athletes are not believed. They are gaslit to questioning their lived experience and forced through re-traumatizing processes when coming forward. Allies of athletes that work in sporting organizations try to come forward and are limited by confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements. These are not sport issues. These are human rights issues. And no confidentiality or non-disclosure agreement should stop anyone or prevent anyone from coming forward to expose the truth. For decades, sport has operated under a veil of sport autonomy. This autonomy has given sport the ability to operate with ultimate authority and with little to no oversight or accountability. Over the past months, we've witnessed how Sport Canada has limited scope and power, and how they failed to make sporting organizations accountable for their lack of action and wrongdoings. Instead of addressing the root problem, Canada has created more problems by empowering sports structures to oversee human rights issues. The Canadian Centre for Sport Dispute Resolution was first appointed in this role, and then, based on anecdotal evidence, the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner was established. These are all sport entities trying to solve human rights issues with limited powers and limited independence. Sport is a small community, and there are far too many real or perceived conflicts of interests to adequately address these issues. Canadian athletes that we've heard from are tired of Band-Aid solutions. Dear members, on behalf of thousands of Canadian athletes, we appeal to you today to strongly support a third-party independent judicial investigation. Your actions following this study must send a clear message to every child, youth, and elite athlete that they will no longer be forced into silence, and that they will be believed and protected when they come forward. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. I'm now going to pass it over to Kim Shore for Gymnasts for Change. Kim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to this committee. This feels like a watershed moment for sport, particularly gymnastics. When you think of gymnasts, picture little children, 6 to 8 years old, starting their competitive journeys, training 20 to 30 hours every week, oftentimes spending more time with their coaches than their parents. These are the profoundly vulnerable little humans entrusted to coaches who promise to teach them to flip and fly. These are the children I speak for today, and for whom we call upon this government and this committee to enact a judicial inquiry into human rights violations against athletes and a lack of mechanisms protecting children in Canada. As a former gymnast myself and mother of a former gymnast, I know the beauty and the potential benefits that sport offers if delivered with an ethic of care and a child-centric approach. However, the hundreds of reports we have received and arrests made in the last 7 months alone confirm our worst fears. Gymnastics is rotting from the top down and the bottom up. I wonder how many of you would choose gymnastics for yourself or your own child if you knew what we do. When you were a child, would you have chosen to repeatedly feel your physical safety was threatened by an adult bullying you to do dangerous skills that you knew could result in catastrophic injury? How many of you experienced a trusted coach pressing your legs into oversplits while you sobbed and begged for them to stop? But they just screamed at you to shut up. Who here has spent the prime of their life with their face stuck in a toilet bowl, throwing up every meal? Who obsessively weighed themselves or were force-fed in hospital to treat an eating disorder? All the while, the soundtrack in your head repeated, "You're fat, you're too ugly to be a gymnast, you look like the Pillsbury Doughboy." How many of you have experienced the confusion, nausea, and panic when a trusted adult suddenly says, "I want to touch you"? Or had to choose between the safe haven of your sexually abusive male coach just to be spared from the outright cruelty of your female coach? Have any of you lived in chronic pain since adolescence? Or self-harmed because the voice in your head said, and maybe still does, "You're worthless, useless, lazy"? Lastly, imagine spending thousands of dollars on therapy just to become a functioning member of society. Our Gymnasts for Change team is here today. My friends, how many of us can relate to these examples? Stay standing, team. If the pain, misery, and fear that you endured as a child athlete was worth the medals that you won. This is a reality for many child gymnasts in Canada. Violence, degradation, humiliation, and some of the worst abuse you can imagine. Yet still, There is no plan for prevention. And let's remember, the lack of diversity in gymnastics means these are often the very most privileged children in our communities. If we can't even keep them safe, what does this mean for kids who are racialized, transgender, or have a disability? These children who are exponentially more vulnerable to maltreatment because of intersecting systems of oppression. As awful as these examples of abuse are, survivors tell us time and time again that what haunts them the most was not being protected by the athletes who had the power to do by the adults who had the power to do something, who instead chose to protect their friends and protect the brand. Gymnasts for Change Canada was a movement we hoped we'd never have to start. Collectively, we believe that if we informed the provincial governing bodies, Gymnastics Canada, and as a last resort, Sport Canada, then anybody would listen to us. They would act with haste to protect athletes. But we were wrong. 9 other countries have already completed independent investigations into their gymnastics programs. They're 2 years ahead of Canada with efforts to dismantle these cultures of cruelty, with legislative change and binding mechanisms that protect athletes' human rights. Let me be very clear. What we're discussing today is not a sport crisis. It is a human rights crisis happening in sport. Canada needs leaders with strong moral courage who will call for a national judicial inquiry to uncover a past that must never be repeated and to generate solutions that have never existed. The time for bold and brave action is now. Every child in Canada deserves to enjoy sport and grow up to be a better person because of their sport experience, not despite it. I ask this committee, how can we continue to hear these stories and not act? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. We're going to move on. We're going to do another sound check with Leah. So I'll just pass that over to the clerk.
Bonjour. Est-ce que c'est mieux?
Est-ce que vous pouvez juste dire quelques mots de
Oui,
plus, s'il vous
donc,
plaît?
alors, est-ce que vous m'entendez mieux? Est-ce que c'est plus audible pour vous? Sinon, je peux essayer sans casque d'écoute carrément.
Hi, this is the chair speaking right now. Thank you so much for being here today, but I recognize the impact that we'll have to our interpreters if they cannot get the proper interpretation, and we've had too many health issues. So what I would like to do is we would like to invite you back for another time to provide your testimony so that we can continue on today. So I'm afraid we won't be able to hear from you today, but we will ensure that we hear from you in the future. Okay? Thank you very much. So with that, we're going to start around with our rounds of testimony, with our rounds of questioning. We will be doing our regular, where it's 6 minutes, and we'll go across. I will be flexible with the time, but I'll ensure that every party does have their allotted amount of time. I'm going to start it off with Anna Roberts. Anna, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your bravery. It's a difficult and emotional situation, and my heart bleeds for you. So thank you for coming and sharing your stories with us today. So I'm going to direct my first question to Kim. So I was reviewing some of your notes and some of the segment that I've watched. And one of the things that you said really stuck with me, and I'm going to quote it. It said, "This is an important first step that must lead to a national, independent, third-party judicial investigation led by human rights experts. This is a quote that you made. We have been clear that the Office of Sport Integrity Commissioner is not equipped to handle these investigations. They lack independence, power to compel, and they are directly funded by Sports Canada, who has time and time again failed Canadian athletes. What would you say to this committee that a third party be organized by athletes and people that are in a better position to understand what has happened? Could you elaborate on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I'd like to hand that answer over to my colleague, Amelia Klein, Gymnast for Change.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think it is critically important that any third-party judicial inquiry be led by athletes and particularly by survivors. Survivors have a very unique experience in sport that they can bring to bear when it comes to especially drafting, for example, the terms of reference for any sort of investigation. What we've learned from speaking with the other countries that have undertaken investigations such as these is that it is vitally important that the terms of reference be crafted in such a way that they will actually get to the root issues within the investigation. So even at the outset of any sort of effort to create an independent investigation, survivors need to be consulted.
So maybe you can answer this for me too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but once a coach or an individual has been charged, I understand that there's no registry?
That's correct. So in certain sports, and I can really only speak to gymnastics because that's my experience, but Gymnastics Canada has a suspended and banned list that is publicly available. However, there's no discipline history that is provided publicly. So if someone is suspended for a year, for example, it will show up that they have been suspended, but as soon as their suspension is over, their name disappears from that list. So there's no way for parents to know whether they're being coached by someone who actually has a discipline history. And certainly there is no national coaching registry that would show the discipline history of coaches in other sports either. So there is the theoretical possibility that a coach could be banned from gymnastics, for example, and then begin coaching in soccer or football or hockey. And there's no clear way to, for parents or for individuals to track where these coaches end up after they've been disciplined.
So you mentioned that other countries are ahead of us by 2 years. From their example, what do they do to ensure that these particular individuals, or how do they stop these particular individuals from getting involved in other sports?
So in a number of different countries, they've tried various different things. So currently in the UK, there are efforts underway to actually change the legislative framework around much of this. So better safeguarding, better, stronger child rights efforts that essentially, as we've been saying, this is a human rights issue as opposed to a sporting issue. This is really a child's rights issue. So the more that legislative change can be made, policy change can be made to essentially take a child-centric, child protection approach to these issues, that seems to be the discussion that's happening in other jurisdictions.
So would you agree that, like any other abuser, that record should never be expunged and it should be released to the public and stay there permanently? Would that not help to ensure that these individuals never, ever, ever have the opportunity of abusing a child again?
Absolutely. And I often use the example of other trust-based professions, so teachers, doctors, lawyers. We all have public disciplinary records. And that's because we're in such a position of power and such a position of trust with the public that it's recognized that we give up some of our privacy rights in an effort to protect the public if we were to abuse that power. And I see that being analogous to the position that coaches are in, especially in sports such as gymnastics, where the people that they have power over are these very vulnerable children. Why wouldn't we have a publicly available discipline record at that point?
I would like to just add that it's impossible for parents to make informed decisions about which coaches or clubs are safe for their kids to participate in. So, for example, the banned and suspended list that Amelia referenced, there's no indication what the charge was, what the code of conduct breach was. So this person on the list may have breached a financial aspect of their membership rights to Gymnastics Canada. But we don't know if it was finance or if it was abuse of children or bullying and harassment of a peer. And that is what Canadian parents and children deserve to know, is who is interacting with their child, what kind of environment it is, so that they can make an informed decision whether they put their child with this coach who has a history of abusing other children. I'm not sure who would do that. Or they choose the club and the coaches that are doing it well.
Thanks so much. And thank you, Amelia. I see Amelia's trying to help me with my timing. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm now going to pass it over to Anita Vandenbelt. Anita, you have the floor for 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to start by thanking all of you for being here and for speaking so openly with us. It is making a difference. It will make a difference. So we very much appreciate this. And I think I speak for all members of the committee that we really are focused on protecting children. I guess that's where my first question I'd like to direct to Ms. Shore. And the question, this is something that is, like many Canadians who are not involved in sport or have children in sport, this is something that is quite shocking to see. And the question that many of us have is how? How is it possible for this to have gone on for decades? How is it that were people looking the other way? Were people, because it's human in us to want to protect children. So somewhere something went wrong. And when I talk to friends who were athletes, they all say, "Oh, we knew who the creepy coaches were. We knew." There's a whisper network. Everybody sort of hushed, but nobody really said it. And so I guess I just want to put an open-ended question to you about how this happened, despite the fact I understand that there have been safety officers in Gymnastics Canada for 30 years, and what is it that has gone wrong?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. Many things have gone wrong, and to your point about looking the other way, willful blindness is very prevalent in sport, particularly gymnastics. We are taught as gymnasts, there's no crying in gymnastics. Put a smile on your face, even if your ankle feels broken or your back has torn muscles. Put on a face and put on a smile and go out there and do your job. And you said that it's natural to want to protect children. What I honestly feel has happened is gymnastics has forgotten that these are children. They literally use the language, coaches use the language, "I'm here to produce elite athletes." Produce. We don't produce children. We nurture them, we grow them, we teach them. There is an unfortunate, very, in my mind, corrupt network of adults protecting adults. I can speak only specifically to gymnastics, but I have sat on both the Provincial Board of Alberta for Gymnastics as well as the National Board for Gymnastics Canada. And I have repeatedly seen friends protecting friends, information not coming forward, board of directors who are uninformed, who know half the situation only, who rely on the narrative of a single person to inform them. And undoubtedly that narrative comes with a not only a perspective, but a desire to protect their friends and themselves and their job, potentially. So yes, as adults in sport, we've all looked the other way. As a parent, I was groomed. As an athlete, I was groomed, and the worst grooming was as a parent because I kept taking my child to gymnastics where she would come home and say, "Mommy, the coach hates me, the coach is mad at us, the coach yelled at us. Look at these burns on my skin I got from having to repeat a skill 100 times over and over." And yet, as a trusting person, you implicitly think that these people are there, as you said, with a second nature to protect children. So you start excusing the behavior at first because you would never dream of anything different.
Excusez, un second. Interpretation. Okay. We just want to make sure everybody can hear, so when...
So I sit back more? Oh.
Adrianosi, you had it too?
Enjeu.
Do you want to continue? If you, Kim, just keep on going. I've stopped the clock regardless. Keep on going. I'm sorry for interrupting, but we just want to make sure everybody can hear.
Of course, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for being so interested to hear. Yes, I think as parents, we mistakenly assume that the people we are handing our children over to, the coaches who have asked us to grant them professional respect and professional trust, are not safeguarding our children. And so we need culture change from the bottom up, top down, in order to protect our children better. And we need people in positions of leadership who will put the needs of children ahead of their own agendas for career advancement or for the protection of the brand.
So Kim, we're having some technical difficulties. I'm just looking at the interpreters. I've stopped the clock. We'll see where we're going. You've got 1:12 left because I keep on stopping it. So we're just going to suspend just for a second here. We want to make sure everything's good, okay? once the interpreters are back in their space, I think we're back on track. What we'll be doing is taking this time and just adding this additional time to the end since we've had to stop. To Anita, you have 1 minute and 12 seconds left. We're really sorry about this. Everybody's so sorry. I'm going to pass the floor back over to Anita. Go ahead. 1 minute 12 left, and then we'll continue.
Well, thank you so much for that very, very honest answer. I saw that, Ms. Klein, you looked like you wanted to add something to that, so I'll just give the rest of the time for you to also respond to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you'll indulge me a few extra seconds. You referenced that Gymnastics Canada has had effectively the same harassment officer for approximately 30 years. Dr. Gretchen Kerr, we understand, has been the go-to harassment officer for primarily most of the complaints that have come through Gymnastics Canada in the last 30 years. In those 30 years, unfortunately, what we have now been reported to us is that abuse has thrived in that time. So we have serious concerns and serious reservations about how complaints have been handled. We have received some very concerning reports regarding Dr. Kerr's conduct. We will be circulating a 5-page brief in which a story in that regard will be articulated to the committee. Essentially, it involves the sexual abuse of several athletes, some of whom were minors. Initially, Gymnastics Canada told those complainants that because the person who was the perpetrator was no longer under contract, Gymnastics Canada could not investigate. They eventually opened an investigation when the Centre for Ethics in Sport insisted that Gymnastics Canada open an investigation. I have a copy of the report that Dr. Kerr created. It essentially summarizes the allegations, but it makes no findings whatsoever of whether those reports were credible. It declines to offer any sort of discipline for that individual, and instead says that the complainants should report it to the massage college. And it then recommends that if that individual ever reapplies to work for Gymnastics Canada, that her file should be reviewed. So there is no discipline history for this person who allegedly has sexually abused at least 5 athletes, some of whom, again, were minors. There's no police. There was no contact with the police, we understand, from Gymnastics Canada when they received these reports. And so as a result, this individual could theoretically continue working not just in gymnastics, but in other sports because there is currently no discipline history. So when you ask why this has continued to be a problem for decades, it is exactly problems like that that we are concerned about.
Amelia, thank you so much. I'm now going to pass it over to Adrienne LaRoche. I'll just remind everybody, put on your earpieces so that you get the interpretation. Make sure the volume is up so you hear it right from the start. Adrienne, the floor is yours.
Merci. Thank you to the 3 of you for being with us today. Ms. Klein, Ms. Shore, Mr. Keeler. This study is essential for the safety of our girls in sports. And I'll start by saying I spent my young years in a gymnasium encouraging my sister who did gymnastics. I noticed the pressure that she faced and how there was a lack of body diversity and how that impacts young girls. It is something that is very present. So thank you again for your presentations. Ms. Shore, Mr. Keeler, I saw you this summer at the Heritage Committee. What have you retained from what you heard this summer, and why are you here today, and why do you believe that this study is important? And you saw how important it was for hockey. Why do you think it is important to extend this to other sports?
This past summer, we self-funded our trip to Ottawa to be present to hear the members of Hockey Canada defend themselves against complaints and allegations and accusations that Rob and I and my team, Gymnasts for Change, know all too well. We wanted to hear what they had to say firsthand. And we heard the same things from that group that I have heard from leaders in gymnastics for the last 6 years as a board member on 2 boards. They were evasive. They were not transparent. Even when they were compelled to testify and hand over documents, they resisted. That is what we fear. That's why a culture review of any sort, the one that Gymnastics Canada is currently paying for with McLaren Group, or frankly, the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner agrees that a culture review is not going to suffice, because we can't hope that the NSO is going to voluntarily hand us over all their dirty secrets.
I think what I've learned and what we've learned with the athletes from the 12 sports, and it's evident we have survivors with us today. They're not here because they want to be from the sport of gymnastics. Sport has not been able to self-regulate. And it almost appears that they're more interested in protecting the brand than exposing the truth. We've heard in the summer Sport Canada failed its duties. We've seen sport structures continue to be established to address human rights issues. Sport can't self-regulate. No other industry in Canada or globally has the ability to regulate itself. So I think that's what we've learned, is it needs to be taken away.
Monsieur Collin, vous avez...
Mr. Keeler and Ms. Klein and Ms. Shore, you talked about the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner that was put in place. Do athletes trust that office, and can you explain why?
Thank you for the question. I don't believe athletes do trust this system that has been set up. There are a number of reasons for that. It is still very deeply embedded within the sport system that, as you've been hearing this morning, athletes do not trust. A good example of that is that the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner is overseen by the SDRCC. On the SDRCC board, appointed earlier this year, is a person who also sat on the board of Gymnastics Canada. And when he was initially appointed to the SDRCC board, he in fact was still an active board member of Gymnastics Canada. That is the body that oversees the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner. So how does any gymnast have any trust in an office that is being overseen by the very people that would need to be investigated? There are a number of different ways in which we are concerned that this office is not equipped to investigate these matters. There's no subpoena power, as Kim was alluding to. There's no ability to compel these NSOs to participate in any sort of review. There's no ability to enforce any recommendations that come out of a report from the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner. We understand that the office is working hard to try to shore up some of those gaps, but at the moment it is not equipped to investigate the types of abuses that we are seeing come forward.
Adrienne, your time is up. I'll make sure that we get around to you, though, one more time. Your time is up. Okay, Leah, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I just want to start off by thanking all of the witnesses today for coming forward with quite raw truths. And I just want to say to Madame Shore, I was very touched when you spoke about the fact that when you came forward to disclose abuse, that people didn't believe you, and just to acknowledge how violent that is and how re-traumatizing that is. And so I'm sorry I'm emotional. To say, I hope that you have some justice here, all of you, that people will hear you and acknowledge your truth. So I just wanted to start off with that. And just to say that I absolutely agree with the witnesses that this is an absolute human rights crisis, certainly a failure to uphold the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, specifically, for example, Article 19, which states that parties shall take all appropriate legislative, administrative, social, and educational measures to protect the child from all forms of physical or mental violence, injury or abuse, neglect, or negligent treatment, maltreatment, or exploitation, including sexual abuse, while in the care of parents, legal guardians, or any other person who has the care of the child. And I was really struck by one of the things that you spoke about, Ms. Klein, which is the fact that there's no requirement for coaches, for example, to have to take an abuse registry check, something that is required. I was a teacher, something that was required of all teachers, and I also was an early childhood educator, something that is required even for early childhood educators to have an abuse registry check. Do you think changing the regulations to make that a requirement would make a difference in the protection of children?
Thank you. I certainly do think that would be a very important change. I think what we have seen is, again, sport being able to operate outside of many of the other norms that other professions already adhere to. And it's never made a lot of sense to me that that's been an exception, given how vulnerable child athletes are. So I think developing a national-wide child abuse registry for coaches certainly would impact.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to add that the background check system in Canada is woefully inadequate. And so that is a very big part of this problem, that for employers, gymnastics clubs, soccer clubs, et cetera, to even background check their potential hires is almost impossible to do it adequately.
So I would agree with you, Ms. Shore, particularly with the fact that it seems that coaches that have committed abuses are kept protected, and so it never would make a registry, so that makes perfect sense to me. I feel terrible. Kohler? Keeler? Sorry. So, Mr. Keeler, you said that sports cannot regulate itself, and that's clear to me. I mean, so I have a couple of questions. One, who is currently appointing members to the regulatory board? So that's like, who is the one that appoints? And two, what would an alternative look like for oversight? Who would appoint, and what would the third-party investigation look like? So who currently appoints, what the alternative would look like, and then what a third-party investigation would look like?
Madam Chair, thank you for the question. What we're seeing in sport and what we're seeing in the solution that sport has done now is moving sport people around into different positions. And working internationally and working in Canada, I know personally that if I'm friends with someone, it's a lot harder for me to call you out. I've gotten past that now in my job, but it's a lot harder. So you have this internal network of everybody knows each other and everybody's trying to protect each other. That's why you have to remove it from sport. I used the example of anti-doping. I spent 20 years at the World Anti-Doping Agency as a result of the Dublin inquiry that resulted in taking drug testing away from sporting organizations. It's independent now. We have to do the same thing for abuse in sport. The second thing is, if you listen to any survivor that has come forward, They're alone, they have no guidance and no support. What we would advocate for is a touch point, where an athlete comes somewhere and they have the support, they have the guidance, and they're going to make those people doing the investigations accountable. An independent investigation, I think, could replicate what we've seen with the Dublin inquiry. It needs to be non-sport people, it needs to be judicial, and it makes sure that everybody has the right and tell the story. And the final thing is, those people that were abusers or enablers need to be made to account. I think that's crucially important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What we're going to do is, I'm messing with the times, of course. What I'm going to do is 4 minutes for CPC, 4 minutes for Liberals, 2 minutes to the Bloc and to the NDP, and then we'll finish it up with 2 minutes to the Conservatives, 2 minutes to the Liberals, and that will end the panels for today, okay? So I'm going to now pass it over for 4 minutes to Dominique Vienne. Dominique, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses for being with us this morning. It's greatly appreciated. It's very helpful for the work that we have to do. It's very difficult to hear. And I have a lot of questions, and of course, I won't have enough time to ask them all. But we're in the time of the Me Too movement. And athletes want the truth to be known. In the day-to-day, I feel that it is the trainer who could be causing issues with athletes. Earlier, you mentioned that it's difficult to verify a trainer's background, and I am shocked to know that criminal backgrounds are not verified when these people are working with vulnerable people. In Quebec, if somebody needs to work with seniors who are at high risk health-wise, the background check is very in-depth. How does that work for trainers now?
Question ouverte
It's an open question to any of our three guests.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I'll start by saying the legal system has let down sport as well. The legal system has particularly let gymnastics down. Even recently, we have had multiple coaches let off, stay of proceedings, acquitted, and that's if we can get enough evidence and enough brave witnesses to come forward to even take a complaint all the way through the legal process. That's like 1 out of 1,000. So if the legal system lets us down, then that person doesn't have a background or a criminal record to be checked with a background check. But what we also are dealing with are hundreds of coaches who are indoctrinated with the mentality that to produce an athlete, you must use harsh techniques, you must shame them, you must guilt them, you must physically manipulate their bodies into positions despite the pain or injury it causes. There's no registry for that. There's no criminal charges for that. Children can be brutalized. My colleague Amelia was overstretched in splits with her leg above her head like this by her male coach, who snapped her hamstring off of her pelvis, and it took a piece of bone with it. There's no registry for that. We don't protect our children beyond the family. If a parent puts a cigarette burn on a child, they'll be called to task, but a coach who physically damages a child is not held to the same account.
Actually, what I'm going to do is I'll switch it over. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you. We're going to just now pass it over to Sonia Sidhu. Sonia, here's your 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, all the witnesses and survival, being with us. And thank you for your bravery. We need to work together on this. So my first question is this. How we can encourage sport organization to meet high standard for the governance, accountability, for the safe support, and how we can teach coaches for the gender-based gap.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I think there are a number of different mechanisms that can be put in place to fix some of these problems. Firstly, I think a key element for why we see what we're seeing is that there has been very little accountability for these coaches who have acted abusively. As my colleague was saying, many of these emotionally and physically abusive coaches are never brought to account. And that's because, first of all, the criminal system will generally not charge them, even though what my colleague described was, in fact, assault. The criminal system will not charge it. And the complaint system that exists within Gymnastics Canada and within these provincial sport bodies is so re-traumatizing and so arduous for complainants to go through that many burn out before there's ever an actual result. Or, as in my case, when I tried to bring my abuse forward in 2021, Gymnastics Canada hired a case manager who told me to my face that I needed to manage my expectations about the outcome. That even though my alleged abuse was incredibly severe, he had seen enough of these investigations to know that I could not expect my coaches to be banned from the sport. And in fact, I could probably not expect them to receive a lengthy suspension. So that is exactly what is the problem, is that coaches are allowed to do this with no expectation they're going to ever be held to account by the organization itself.
Thank you. And the discipline history, you gave the example for the UK. Do you think any other country has doing something different?
I believe there's several countries that are trying. So this is somewhat like trying to move a mountain. It requires a lot of legislative and policy change. But the UK is trying. Australia is also trying. Switzerland also came out with a very robust report about their gymnastics and sports system. There is also a very good example out of Norway in terms of how they deliver sport in general, not just gymnastics. They have less of an emphasis on early competitive, early specialization, and instead on the joy of sport and the value of sport for movement. And I think that's an entire culture shift that we need to see here in Canada. We need to view sport not as the end-all, be-all to achieve a medal and to achieve Olympic greatness. It should be something that's considered a lifelong love and something that people can do all the way through to adulthood. That is the type of culture shift that will, I think, inform and change policy in a profound way.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll now pass it over for 2 minutes to Adrienne.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much again to the witnesses for taking the time to be with us today. I would like to come back because, and 2.5 minutes goes by very quickly. Ms. Klein and Ms. Shore, you spoke to Minister Saint-Onge to change this toxic culture and to end the abuse of young athletes. What do you expect from her and from us as elected officials? And what response are you expecting to hear from us? How can we act?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that important question. What we expect is what we hope for, and that is that our call for a judicial inquiry will be heard and acted upon. If I'm very honest, Gymnasts for Change has received a lot of attention, both from government, from MPs, from the media. We feel we have been heard, but now is time for action.
I would agree with that. I would also add that we are hoping for accountability. What the survivors have not seen to date is any sort of accountability for the current leadership at GymCan that have been implicated recently in essentially covering up abuse. We're hoping that this committee can use its power to hold those individuals to account as well.
Mr. Keeler, if you want to share what you expect from us as elected officials, what do you expect from us after this study?
I would support the call that the gymnasts have made. I would support the call from the 12 separate sport athletes that have spoken to us about their abuse, and that is to implement immediately a third-party independent judicial investigation, one, to understand the abuse that's happened across this country, and two, to act on it, and as Kim and Amelia said, to make those accountable for abuse named and removed from sport.
Thanks very much, Rob. We're now going to pass it over for 2 minutes to Leah.
Thank you so much. You shared, many stories today that have lasting impacts on your spirits and the spirits of your child. And then you spoke about a failure to uphold human rights, particularly the UN Convention of the Child, something that we are obliged to as members of Parliament, to uphold human rights, especially international conventions we've signed on to, including that Article 39, states shall take all appropriate measures to promote physical and psychological recovery and social reintegration of a child victim of any form of neglect, exploitation, or abuse, torture, or any other form of cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment or armed conflict. Such recovery and reintegration shall take place in an environment which fosters the health and self-respect and dignity of the child. In your, from your perspective, what would that look like?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. You're addressing our spirit. I think I speak on behalf of at least the over 600 gymnasts who have signed our open letter that our spirits have been broken. I can't believe that the environment that I endured when I was 13 years old and thought might have changed enough with our society evolving that it would be safe to put my child in the sport that I loved, that I found beautiful, that was a part of my soul. And it became a part of her soul as well. I never expected that what had perpetuated when I was a child would in fact be worse now, 35 years later. So those things that you read in the convention, they don't apply in Canada. I have not seen them at play in a gym in Canada, in gymnastics. I don't see that at all in operation. So whatever we need to do that, to get that as a national standard, I'm in favor of.
Thank you so much. We're going to do our last 2 rounds. We're going to have Michelle for 2 minutes, and then we're going to go over to Emanuelopoulos sorry about that, Emanuela. We're going to go to Emanuela for 2 minutes online. Go ahead, Michelle. I can merge a whole name.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely, 2 minutes will never do justice what we need to do today. I want to thank you. This is very powerful, and you inspire us. We're all very emotional, and children's welfare is our future. Yesterday was National Day of the Child, and It's powerful when you read a lot of the fact that we rank lowest in child survival, including teen suicide and child mortality, health, including immunization and unhealthy weight, and children's overall life satisfaction. And this has a lot to do with it. This is definitely interconnected. Amelia, I have so much to say, but I know you have a testimony that you didn't get to do, and I would like to give the floor to you to give it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that. Many of my comments that I was initially going to give have been echoed in what my colleagues have said. However, what I would like to impress upon this committee is that while it's vital that survivors are heard, and we so appreciate this opportunity today, we could sit here for hours telling you stories that would break your hearts, and we could break them over and over and over again. But that would be a useless exercise unless there is action at the end of it. And that is what survivors want to see, and that is what we have not seen yet, is that people need to be held to account. As I was saying, the current leadership of Gymnastics Canada, despite all of the media attention, despite the fact that the CEO has been implicated in at least 2 situations in which abusive coaches were promoted under his watch, he still sits in his seat. The harassment officer that I referenced earlier is still in her seat. There has been no accountability yet, and that is really what we are searching for, because so many of us have been denied justice. So, that is why we're here today. We hope that this committee will do that for us.
We're good. Okay, I'm going to pass it on over to Emanuela. Emanuela, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to begin by thanking all of the witnesses for their bravery in coming today to share their experiences with us and to try to make sport better in Canada for the kids that are joining teams and that are getting involved. I have a teaching background. I've played sports myself, not at the professional level in any way. I've coached. I know that I think not necessarily Gymnastics Canada alone, but I think that this is something that's a problem across the board. And anytime a child is away from their parent and is with an adult that is not related to them, unfortunately, more precautions need to be taken. And kids are some of the main victims of sexual abuse. And we don't talk about these things with our kids. We don't talk about it in schools. We don't talk about it in teams. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what role protecting kids that are in sports, what role teaching them and having them know what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, and who they can go to. You know, for example, if someone touches you in this way, you go to the police. What are your thoughts on that going forward? I've spoken to Minister St. Onge. I understand what your main ask is, and because you've mentioned it several times, I'm focusing on something else. The minister will be speaking to her counterparts, her provincial counterparts, and I'm wondering if there's any comments that you have in the area that I just discussed.
Madam Chair, for that question. I think it's vitally important to be having conversations with children very early on about bodily autonomy in particular. And this is something that I've discussed with many survivors, that as gymnasts, we never understood that we had bodily autonomy. And this played into not just sexual abuse, but the physical violence that was done to us as well. We did not realize that we could say no. We didn't know that an adult manipulating us to the point of us screaming in pain was not appropriate, because we trusted that our coaches knew what was best for us. And that was part of the grooming process. And I think part of what then contributes to sexual abuse as well is that once you have been groomed to the point where a coach can do anything to your body at any time, of course, then it leads into the ability for them to sexually abuse children too. So I think those conversations, that education, and that breaking down of the natural power imbalance that exists there is vitally important.
Wonderful. On behalf of the committee, I would really like to thank Amelia and Kim and Rob for all coming and bringing forward your stories. As we indicated, this is going to be a very difficult study. If you need any supports, please contact the clerk. We are here for you. We recognize that today is just the beginning of this journey with us. So thank you so much. We're going to suspend just for seconds here because we're going to get it started with a new panel immediately. So suspend for about 28 seconds. There we go, 28 today. Meeting back to order, and we'll be starting with our second panel. What we'll be able to do is I'll just ask if everybody could start taking their seats. On our second panel today, everybody is online with us, I believe. We have, as an individual, Teresa Fowler, Assistant Professor from Concordia University of Edmonton. We also have Shannon Moore, Assistant Professor, Faculty of Education, University of Manitoba. From Canadian Sport and Women in Sport, we have Alison Sandmeyer-Graves, Chief Executive Officer. And from Indigenous Sport and Wellness Ontario, we have Belle Bailey, Assistant Sport Program Director, and Christina Ruddy, Director and Coordinator, Government Relations, National Strategy, and both of them are in the room today. We're going to be providing 5 minutes for opening statements to each group. As you know, and you can see, we're starting a little bit late, so I'm just going to try to keep everything rolling today. But I'm going to pass it over to Teresa and Shannon. They're sharing their time, I assume. Teresa and Shannon, if you're sharing your time, you have 5 minutes. Oh, and we're not going to use this. I just got so excited. Is Sonia back?
Greetings. My name is Shannon Moore, and I'm an assistant professor in the Faculty of Education at the University of Manitoba. I'll be sharing my time today with one of my co-researchers.
Hi, and I'm Teresa Fowler, as mentioned, assistant professor at the Faculty of Education at Concordia University of Edmonton. And we'd like to thank the chair and committee for inviting us here today. Today, we are going to share a few findings from a study we conducted in 2021 with 21 elite level male ice hockey players about hypermasculinity in hockey. Our findings also echo testimony that has been presented already at this committee, specifically regarding Mr. Keeler's testimony regarding the silence of athletes, lack of accountability, and that we need to believe and protect athletes. Also with Ms. Shore's testimony that speaks to a lack of diversity in sports, and that adults who are in protective roles need to protect athletes, not the brand. In Canada, men's ice hockey has been connected to our national identity, and researchers have made this connection due to enrollments, media attention, and funding. This connection between nationalism and men's ice hockey is reinforced through sports being under the portfolio of the Minister of Canadian Heritage. Prioritizing men's ice hockey as heritage upholds a culture that is white, cis, straight, and male-dominated. This culture is audaciously grounded in the mentality that winning at all costs comes at the expense of women's right to safety, as well as men's physical and mental health. While participants in our study identified as being resistant to this culture, they overwhelmingly spoke of their inability to push against this culture. One participant, for example, shared with us a moment from the locker room and the policing tactics that breed conformity. The coach, quote, came into the room and went single file and basically told every player how bad they were and what they did was bad. And at the end of his speech, he said he was going to go and hang himself in his shower and it would be our fault at 12 years old. As Canadians, we need to question the national status of men's ice hockey and the privilege granted to those who play, especially when this results in the normalization of sexual assault and subsequent cover-ups. In our study, when asked directly, the participants acknowledged that sexism is pervasive within hockey culture. However, they often did not offer specific examples or engage with this concept in any meaningful way. With that said, the participants shared stories throughout their interview that we coded as sexism and misogyny. The participants told stories of women and girls being used for props and for points at team events. One participant shared they had a coach do body shots off a 15-year-old girl at a rookie party. To these players, these were just hockey stories shared casually throughout the interviews. The superficial engagement with sexism in our data and in the larger culture may reveal why sexual assaults continue to happen, why cover-ups continue that center on saving the team and the men involved rather than the victims, and why substantive change is elusive.
The consensus among researchers is that ice hockey socializes young boys and men into specific masculine ideals. Hockey masculinity involves aggression, dominance, stoicism, and bravado. As players progress in the game to elite levels, these behaviors are expected, reinforced, and rewarded. Yet, as the participants in our study made clear, these expectations were harmful to their physical and mental health. When people suggest that researchers do not understand hockey culture and are villainizing hockey over other sports, they ignore the voices of athletes like those in our study. While reading through the data, we were struck by the participants' expressions of precarity. These elite-level players felt as though they were walking on eggshells, fearful of the consequences of any little mistake. The participants expressed insecurities about their position on the team, stating they were lucky to be on the team, had to work very hard to stay, or felt they couldn't take time for injuries. They felt that they needed to sacrifice their bodies for the team, which is justified as, 1, you are part of a national sport, something bigger than yourself, and 2, there is the hope of making it. Everything about the game is about the next steps, and the hope of mobility is used to keep people in line. As one participant stated, quote, if you're not going to do exactly what we're asking, if you're not going to give up everything you have, if you're not going to stand up for your team, then you're going to show up one day and your equipment's going to be in a garbage bag in a shopping cart out back. And that's how they cut people, end quote. Participants also spoke of being traded as teenagers, one referring to himself as a suitcase. Others outright stated that their coaches did not care about them as people and only saw them as, quote, money. They referred to hockey as a cutthroat industry, and they knew that they were the product. The sense of precarity that results from a process of commodification may help, but not excuse, why hockey players do not overtly actively resist elements of the culture, even those that are damaging to their own mental health. In the wake of the Hockey Canada allegations, we are witnessing a superficial response to a systemic issue. It seems as long as the game promotes nationalism and maintains its national status, particular aspects of the culture will be promoted, ignored, and excused. These cultural aspects will continue to harm the victims of the culture who are assaulted, made objects, excluded, and discarded in the name of winning at all costs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We're now going to pass it over to Canadian Women in Sport and Alison Sandmeyer. Graves, you have the floor now for 5 minutes.
Bonjour, Madame la Présidente.
Hello, Madam Chair and distinguished committee members.
Meyer, I am the Chief Executive Officer of Canadian Women in Sport. My pronouns are she, her. I'm joining you today from the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. Before I begin, I want to express my deep respect and gratitude to the survivors of maltreatment in sport. We stand with you in seeking change. We are motivated in our work at Canadian Women in Sport by our belief that safe, equitable, and inclusive sport is a powerful vehicle to advance opportunities and equity for women in every area of society. I am here today with the goal of ensuring that sport lives up to this promise. Maltreatment in sport is global and universal, as we heard Rob Keeler share, but women and girls are a particularly vulnerable group. Even more so, women and girls who experience overlapping systems of oppression, such as Indigenous girls, transgender girls, and girls with disabilities. How did we get here? Despite progress, research and experience confirm that sport remains a male-dominated space in which patriarchy, misogyny, and hegemonic masculinity are institutionalized and expressed culturally at every level of sport. Women and girls are systematically devalued, creating conditions that put them at risk of harm due to maltreatment or gender-based violence. And this is normalized. As we just heard, there's no doubt that this negatively impacts men and boys as well. We recognize that many women have also internalized patriarchy and misogyny, and that women can and do perpetuate gender inequity and cause harm themselves. This is a reality that must be accounted for in developing solutions. Recent examples of these phenomena in the news include unchecked toxic masculinity, normalizing gender-based violence by male athletes against young women, gender inequity in the form of inadequate oversight and accountability, exposing young women athletes to unfettered abuse by coaches, and misogyny in coaching practices, expressed as body shaming and weight policing of young girls, to name but a few. We need a sports system that is values-based, a sports system that prioritizes the dignity, the rights, and the well-being of participants above all else, reflected in how sport is designed, measured, and funded. A sports system that reflects the needs and interests of women and girls and other underrepresented groups by embedding their voices and perspectives in every aspect, from governance and strategy to program delivery. And a sports system that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive at its core. Safety in sport is inextricably tied to the decades-long fight for women to be valued, respected, and treated fairly in sport and beyond. Without gender equity, sport will not be a safe space for women and girls, and without safety, full inclusion for women and girls is impossible. We firmly support the need for a multitude of safeguarding measures to mitigate harm by anyone in sport. And as part of this, we must act with urgency to address gender inequity. This must be done with an intersectional focus. Progress is undoubtedly happening, but it is taking too long and it is inconsistently realized across the sport system. The recent announcement of 25.3 million in renewed federal funding for gender equity in sport is vitally important. But it is clear from the testimony today that further measures are needed to accelerate progress. The goal must be structural and cultural transformation. Anything less will be insufficient. To that end, our recommendations are the following. First, echoing the other witnesses, we must seize on the all-party concern about abuse in sport to initiate a national judicial inquiry by the Government of Canada into maltreatment at all levels of sport to gain a full systemic view of the challenges and to design appropriate solutions. Again, an intersectional lens must be applied to this process, an intersectional gender lens, And as part of the inquiry, possible regulatory systems for sport should be explored. In the meantime, move urgently to use the full force of the federal government as a major investor in sport to effect change. This includes imposing minimum standards for gender equity, diversity, inclusion, and safeguarding for any organization receiving sport funding. This should not be limited to the core funding frameworks alone. Funding for high performance from Own the Podium, as well as for events hosting, infrastructure, projects, and so forth, should all be contingent on groups meeting these standards for values-based sport. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And finally, I will pass it over to Indigenous Sport and Wellness. Belle and Christina, if you could share your time for the next 5 minutes, I'll pass the floor to you.
Kwe Belle Bailey Nijnakas Piktwatnganagondaba Makwa Shid Miknaknandoram. Hello, my name is Belle Bailey. I'm an Algonquin from Pikwakanagan First Nation, and I have been passionate about sport my whole life. In 2017, I had the honor to be chosen to represent Team Ontario at the North American Indigenous Games as an athlete. In 2020, I was hired by Indigenous Sport and Wellness Ontario to help administer many aspects of the same provincial sports body. It is a role I am still in today and enjoy very much. In 2023, I will be coaching the Ontario badminton team as we travel to Nova Scotia next summer to compete at the North American Indigenous Games once again. I'm here to speak to you today on behalf of Indigenous Sport and Wellness Ontario, and for the remainder of this speech, I will be referring to the organization by its acronym FEWO. FEWO is the designated provincial Aboriginal sport body for Ontario, serving all Indigenous peoples and communities across the province, including First Nation, Inuit, and Métis living on and off reserve in rural and urban settings. Our organization develops opportunities for participation in sport and cultural activities that promote wellness and positive lifestyles. We have implemented a Women and Girls program that is intended to increase opportunities for them to participate in sport, recreation, and physical activity while empowering them through increased confidence, capacity, and knowledge. Recently, we developed a Women and Girls Sports Fund and organized the first ever Sharing Our Strength Women and Girls Conference. We would like to put forward the following observations. Number one, that gender equality in sport in our country is grossly unbalanced. It is common knowledge that the girls' sport participation rates decrease as they enter adolescence, leading to a dropout rate of 1 in 3 girls leaving sport by their teens. By ages 19 to 24, that number has been reduced to a 34% participation rate. For Indigenous women and girls, this disparity is even worse with only a 24% participation rate starting in their teenage years. Number two, Canadian sports media doesn't provide proper representation of women athletes that could act as role models for youth. Studies show that 92.6% of content is solely related to men's sport coverage. However, additional research shows that Canadians want to watch women's sport content. The issue is they can't find a place to watch it. As you can imagine, similar information on the representation of Indigenous people in the sports media is almost non-existent. Representation matters. Number three, that conscious and unconscious gender biases plays a huge role in all aspects of sport. Women's abilities and skills are systematically underestimated. This perceived inequality is a barrier to sport for women and girls. Men are viewed with the assumption that they are competent in sport. Women must first prove themselves and then fight every day to show they are competent. Once the element of racial biases is added regarding Indigenous people to the biases that already exist for women, one can easily see the uphill battle that must be fought. And lastly, number four, this conversation leads directly to pay equity, as there is a correlation between lower wages being caused by the lack of media coverage and underrepresentation in leadership roles. While Canada has made strides in this regard, much more work is needed. ISWA would like to make the following recommendations. Number one, to increase sports programming targeted specifically to women and girls that creates a safe space for them to pursue physical activity and wellness opportunities. This will reduce psychosocial barriers to recreation, health, and wellness. These opportunities can put women and girls on the sport pathway participating in sport for life. Number two, showcase and celebrate more female athletes as a whole. This includes showcasing more Indigenous women and girls succeeding in sport also. By recognizing and acknowledging athletic excellence and sharing the stories of success, we can continue to inspire and provide role models for younger athletes to look up to. As previously stated, representation matters. What you cannot see, you cannot become. Number 3, the Government of Canada's commitment to achieving gender equity in sport at all levels by 2035, in our opinion, is much too late. Recent surveys have shown that 1 in 4 girls aren't committed to returning to their pre-pandemic sports at a time when sport may be more important than ever. Let's move this timeline forward. And lastly, number 4, increase support for building sport pathways and career pathways for women to increase the number of female athletes, certified coaches, managers, and personal trainers who in turn can serve as role models for younger athletes. In closing, my name is Belle Bailey. I'm a proud Algonquin woman from Mpegwaknagan First Nation, and I am here today representing Indigenous Sport and Wellness Ontario. We will continue to advocate for women and girls in sports and hope the committee considers our recommendation seriously. Madam Chair, we would like to express our gratitude to the committee for this opportunity to be heard. Thank you, miigwech.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to let everybody know at 12:30 there are supposed to be bells for the 1 o'clock vote. At that time, I will have to take a vote whether or not we'll continue to go at that time. So I'm just kind of letting everybody know that there's going to be choice for us. I'm going to say we should probably continue since we have all of these great people in the room. But I'm going to just get started before the bells. We will start with 6 minutes with Michelle Frary. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again to all of our witnesses for being here today. I really appreciate your time. I know the whole committee does, those virtually and in person. Ms. Fowler, if I may start with you, I had the opportunity to do some interviewing on Heritage Canada, the Heritage Committee rather, with Hockey Canada. And at that time, one of the witnesses, Mr. Smith, had referred to the hockey players it's almost subconscious in a way, but that they were commodities. And, I couldn't help but think if we are treating our children or our players or our athletes like commodities, what will they then treat others like? And I'm curious what your thoughts on that is in terms of sport overall.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you question. And sorry, the backflow right away is just putting me off a bit. Okay. And again, our study is grounded in hockey culture, and that's not to take away from the experiences that other folks have shared. But what we see in our work is exactly what you're talking about, is how these players are commodified for the winning aspect. And then how does that then empower them to treat others? Well, it doesn't. Men in our study talked about wanting to speak up and out. However, nobody in the dressing room was. So therefore, you just go along with what the coach says. And when the coach is telling you to win at all costs, those costs, unfortunately, come at the expense of women and girls, as we have learned this summer. And I think it's also important here to mention, and then I'll turn it over to Shannon so she can add, that researchers have been doing this work for decades. These stories for researchers and victims are not new. People have not been listening. And so while Hockey Canada, while it is certainly a tragic event, it also offers us an opportunity to, as others have said, to really shift the culture of sport. And I'll turn it over to Shannon.
Thank you very much. And yes, I appreciate that question about commodification, because it was a huge theme in our research, the ways in which the 15-year-old participants, like when they were 15, all of our participants were over 18, but they spoke of how they felt about the sport as a job as early as 13 and 14 years of age, and how there was no joy in the game for them anymore. And I know somebody referenced the notion of joy earlier. They did not speak about the sound of their skates on the ice. They did not speak about camaraderie. They did not speak about having fun. They spoke about it in the steps to get to their next level of the sport. And we felt that this made them feel constantly precarious, as I mentioned, and that precarity was one of the reasons that they didn't speak out. We could speak to many other reasons why we think our participants did not speak out about assaults that they witnessed or sexism that they witnessed, but commodification was certainly a huge theme that reduced people speaking out.
Thank you so much for that. And I know we've heard some really powerful testimony and some great ideas in terms of legislation. I think one of the pieces that I would love to see further conversation on, and perhaps you have the research, but parents' role in that commodification of buying in to the coach's ideal that your child is directly linked to their worth in the game. And there is a lot of responsibility on parents in this conversation that they too are sort of siding with the coach and at the expense of the child. So I'm curious on your thoughts on that and what we can do as elected officials to implement policies really to help educate parents better so they're not pushing their agenda onto their child.
Yeah, thank you for that. That is a good point. And again, I'll turn it over to Shannon because, everybody is implicated in this culture, not only parents, but fans, media, as was mentioned before, with respect to the amount of broadcast time for men's sports over women's sports. All of us are complicit in that. And if you ask what the government can do, we need to start first by looking where does sports fall within the portfolio of the federal government. As we mentioned, it falls under the Canadian heritage. Imagine if sports fell under health, what difference that lens might make with respect to how we approach sports. And I'll pause it over to Shannon.
Yes, thank you. And I think the lack of education in general, certainly I'm housed in the Faculty of Education, but that was one of the elements that came out of our study is there's a general lack of education for coaches, for players, for understanding healthy masculinity and the ways in which they potentially commodify other people in their lives. And then obviously education for parents. And there is just a complete lack of education around gender at all. Certainly they are constantly schooled in gender, but they do not discuss gender in overt ways. We think that the locker room culture was a huge issue with this, that it's a space in which the young men and boys do not have a coach, and there is a lot of discussion in the locker rooms and the idea that you have to keep things in the locker rooms. And then I think what I would say to parents is, how are children being adultified in this process of commodification? If you have young children at 13 and 12 years of age, never getting a season off, it's not like they go play baseball in the summer. They're now going to hockey camps because they need to get ready for the next steps. Asking parents, how are you playing into the commodification of your child and the adultification of your child? And often we think we don't need to talk to men and boys in hockey because they're a privileged group of people. But as Teresa's other research is showing us, they need to be talking about their experiences with masculinity in the process of being made into a gender through hockey.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to interrupt now because the bells are ringing, so I'm looking for unanimous consent so that we can carry on with testimony. Fantastic seeing so. We'll carry on. Jenna Suds, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today and for the very important work that you are doing. I think I'd like to start with a very basic question, and I will direct that to Ms. Sandmeyer-Graves, Canadian Women in Sport. And that is, first of all, acknowledging that data shows that typically half as many women participate in sport than men. And so I'm wondering if you can share with us what factors that you see in your work that help explain why that is.
Thank you for the question. Yes, it's true that women and girls participate at far lower rates than men and boys. And as referenced, we have research that shows that during adolescence, so those teenage years, girls drop out at a rate of 1 in 3 from sport, those who were playing, and while boys stay in sport and drop out at a rate of 1 in 10. So what's going on is the question as I understand it. And I think at the end of the day, it's complex and multifaceted. But what the girls tell us as the most important factors for them, things come up around access to sport. Girls still don't have the same number and ease of access to opportunities to play, for sure. But they also talk about quality of sport. Sport having been designed by men for boys and men historically, all efforts to include girls and women in sport is remedial. It's retrofitting, it's bolting on, if you will. And sport is still, because it is largely, I mean, it varies from sport to sport, but because it is largely led by men, even women-dominated sports for participation have largely male coaches. If you look at sports like ringettes and others, really defined by men. And so therefore it is designed and delivered through a male worldview. And girls are saying it's not working for them. They don't feel like it was designed with their needs and interests in mind, and it stops being effective for them. They also talk about things like safety. They talk about bullying. They talk about real struggles with body confidence and body image. In sport, your body is on display and people are constantly interacting with it. And so it's a multitude of factors. But what we have ultimately is girls saying, this is my discretionary time. This is my out of school time, my away from my other friends' time. And sport ultimately isn't serving me. And of course, yes, safety is very much part of that. And when you talk to girls about safety, when we talk about maltreatment broadly, it's not just about safety from sexual abuse and sexual harassment. It's psychological safety, it's emotional safety, it's safety among their peers, it's safety with the adults in the room. And so looking at that holistically is really important when we start to think about solutions.
Incredible. Thank you very much. Very apparent. We have lots of work still to do. I'd like to direct my next question to Ms. Bailey here in the room. You shared, I think I counted 3 recommendations with us today, and the last one being that the government commit to achieving gender equality in sport, or gender equity, in sport. And I'd love to give you the floor to talk a bit more about what that looks like to you and expand upon that recommendation.
Sorry, can you just repeat that last one?
I believe it was your 3rd recommendation that you listed was around the government committing to achieve gender equity in sport. And just wanted, if you'd like, to expand upon what you think that should look like, what that means to you. Not to put you on the spot. If I'm putting you on the spot, I can move on. Absolutely, yes, please.
So I think that when we talk about gender equality in sport, we're not just looking at the big picture of like what we see on TV and stuff like that, but it's grassroots equal opportunities. So it's the same opportunities, for boys, girls, LGBTQIA plus 2+, that they have the opportunity to even try for sport. So when we come from an Indigenous perspective, we're also looking at the multiple barriers for Indigenous people in sport, including poverty, distance. We have to acknowledge the far north. And most of those opportunities come to boys and men and not to women. So we need to look at more investments in those that are further away from sports in their lives. So further placed away by poverty, by nutrition, by all those basic level things that, is common in the mainstream populations, but not when it comes to Indigenous people. So when we talk about gender equality, we're looking at a bigger picture. Equal opportunity for boys, girls, and all the different communities around that, and what it could look like in the future. I mean, that could be absolutely beautiful, right? So we would have, recently we attended the National Aboriginal National Aboriginal Hockey Championship, and there is equal representation there between men and women. And that's from our own communities, putting those youth forward to have those opportunities. But that takes a whole community and a national effort to do.
Wonderful.
So we get equality in those places, but we don't get it at the grassroots level. So that's where we need to look deeper, is at the grassroots at home in our backyards, and that we're targeting both women and girls.
Thank you. We're now going to turn it over to Audran LaRoche. Audran, 6 minutes.
Merci. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being with us here and in the room. Thank you for your presentations. Our study is is important and essential and urgent. My first question is for Ms. Fowler. I was at the Heritage Committee this summer, and I believe that you were part of the co-signers of researchers that wrote a letter this summer. Ms. Moore, I see you're also nodding, so if you have anything to add after, please do. But firstly, why did you sign this letter? How did you feel touched by what was going on this summer with Hockey Canada at Heritage Canada?
Sorry, we decided that Shannon was going to go first, but you asked me directly, so I'll go. We signed the letter as researchers who have been doing this work, and as I mentioned, researchers have been doing this work for some folks decades, not necessarily me, but it was important for us to sign the letter to say, hey, we're here. We've been talking about this for a long period of time. Our colleagues have been sounding this alarm for a long period of time. And again, it begs the question that brings us all here. If people have been sounding the alarm in men's sport, doesn't it make sense then that nobody's listening when women are sounding the alarm in other sports? And I'll turn it over to Shannon.
Thank you. And thank you for going first again. It gives me a little time to collect my thoughts. So thank you for that. I think why we signed on to the letter is because we do not see systemic changes. We see an attempt to brand the changes that are needed in sport and hockey with slogans, but there isn't a real attempt to listen to what researchers have been saying. Although our third co-researcher is an elite level male hockey player himself, people consistently try to find ways to undermine what we are saying, either because we are female athletes, parents, or our co-researcher, Dr. Tim Skoos, is no longer an elite level player. So ageism is used to discount what he is saying. And so we signed on to the letter for exactly the reasons Dr. Fowler said, because we think that people need to actually listen to what researchers who are speaking directly to athletes who are afraid to speak in other contexts, and to listen to that research and actually do something about it, rather than these superficial silver bullet attempts.
I know my time is running out, but you were saying that the solutions are well known, and you stated a few in your opening remarks and during the first few questions that we asked you. But Ms. Moore and Ms. Fowler, if you could summarize what we need to remember from the suggested proposals.
I think that we need to recognize these issues are systemic and work to change the culture rather than centering discussions on bad apples, because that's what's happened thus far is people are isolated and it is deemed as though that person doesn't represent the culture, and so we will just cut them out. We need to make discussions and workshops about sexual violence, consent and healthy relationships part of team training. We need to make space for discussion about the brand of masculinity that's expected and promoted and rewarded in hockey culture. It is damaging not only to people in these men and boys' lives, but it's damaging to the men themselves. And I will pass to Dr. Fowler if she has anything else to add to our recommendations.
Yeah, and the other couple of recommendations that we mentioned actually in our piece that we wrote for the Conversation Canada is to really, and that's what this committee is doing, which we're thankful for, is to really interrogate these institutional practices that reward this particular brand of masculinity, as well as to consider all the hierarchies that are contributing to this practice and go beyond the superficial. As Shannon mentioned, the rebranding does nothing to change a culture. It just puts another lipstick on top of it. And what folks in positions of power in these organizations need to do is really reflect on how they respond to these incidences, right? Don't just brush them aside. Don't tell them to come back later after the game. Really take time and devote to listen to our athletes and protect our athletes.
Speaking of protecting athletes, I have 1 minute left. So with regards to the complaints process, what do you think about it? Do you see, or how do you see this structure and what mechanism should be implemented as soon as a complaint is filed in order to support victims?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure who that was directed to. I think that what should happen as soon as a complaint is filed is that it should be taken to a secondary body, and teams should not be and institutions should not be looking at themselves. I think we need outside institutions to do that. Dr. Fowler, I don't know if you want to make other recommendations there.
Yeah, I definitely agree and the calls that came through already regarding other parties investigating these incidences. And we really need to look back and consider how these incidents have been handled to say that's not how we need to do it, and move on from there and have people independent of the organization do the investigating.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to pass it over now to Leah Gazan for 6 minutes. Leah?
Thank you so much, Chair. My first question is for Madame Moore or Fuller. One of the barriers to sport that was identified online at the Canadian Women in Sports website in 2021 spoke about the lack of provision of sports and recreational spaces for women only and for two-spirits, trans and non-binary people. I know that you had made mention to that in your testimony, Madame Fuller, and I'm wondering if you could expand on that, what that looks like.
Teresa, do you mind if I just jump in before we go to you? I think that in our study, because I would feel uncomfortable speaking beyond our study because I'm in the Faculty of Education, I'm not a sports sociologist, so a lot of my recommendations are educational. But what we saw in our study was discussions of men and boys leaving elite level sports because they felt the space was not safe for them. And so when we look at which brand of masculinity is privileged in sport, you are eliminating men who express femininities, right? When we think about a gender binary, there's such an assumption of the conflation of sex and gender in our society. And we need to really push back at that and look at the ways in which these spaces are unsafe for males who express femininities. Even our co-researcher speaks about the fact that his son finds the locker room, so uncomfortable because it is so loud and he does not know where there is a space for him. So certainly beyond our research, other people would have things to say, but in our research, it was really how the spaces themselves were not conducive to varied performances of masculinities.
Yeah, and just to add on, I feel like it's a bit of a paradox in that we need safe spaces for people who do not conform to these team standards. Like, for example, in Calgary, there's a hockey league or a team that is all gay male players, and they play similar teams. There's obviously women's teams. We have these separate spaces for a reason, but I think the danger in that is it keeps the spaces separate. And the danger that we see in men's ice hockey, for example, is it's a very cis, straight, very hetero, patriarchal environment with no room for anyone to be on any sort of continuum of difference. So while we certainly need safe spaces for folks to be able to express themselves, we also need to be mindful that we do not continue to keep these spaces segregated in a way that allows cultures like we see in men's ice hockey to flourish.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Totally agree. Madame Bailey, you spoke about the importance of mentorship and role models, and the importance of others seeing others like them in sport, particularly some of the work that you've done and some of the representation you've achieved as now a mentor and representative at the North American Indigenous Games. Can you elaborate on that, the importance of mentorship and role models in sport?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the mentorship and role models. Personally, being a woman and being Indigenous, I really didn't have anyone for me to look up to. So it was a little bit of a hard upkeeping in me participating in sports. So I would kind of just, I would sit there and do my research of people that I could look up to that were people like me, since I didn't have anyone in my life to do it. So I think it's really important just to have that person to look up to, which is why I chose to be a coach. I chose to do that route and go coach at the next North American Indigenous Games, because I didn't have someone, and I want to be that person for another youth growing up.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's really inspiring, including what you shared about this sharing or strength gathering. Can you expand on that?
The gathering or the conference?
The conference, sorry.
Yeah, of course. So my colleague and I decided that we started the Women and Girls Committee, and we're co-chairs of it. We do it together. And we decided that there needed to be a space for women and girls that could come together, share stories, and listen to people for them to look up to as well. It was all about role models for this as well. So we invited entrepreneurs, cultural-based individuals, and athletes as well, for them to share their own personal stories and share if they had a business that no one knew about, for more individuals to know about them. And we thought that it was incredibly important to make this for women and girls because, like I said, there is not a lot of representation, or a lot of representation that we know about. So we wanted it to be something that people could go to and feel safe, like a safe space for them to share stories and to listen from others.
Do you think if there was more investment in mentorship and role model programs, do you think, because you indicated that participation rates are lower for Indigenous women and girls, do you think if there was more investment in mentorship and role model programs, do you think it would encourage others to participate in sports?
100%. Yes.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm just going to give everybody an update. We have 9 minutes and 48 seconds until we vote. So kind of just looking at the time, what I would like to do is go through our last round, and then once we go to vote online, then the meeting is done. So what we're going to do is 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute. Okay, I'll start off with Anna for 4 minutes, over to Adam, and then back to Adrian and Leah. So Anna, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. And I think we have a great deal of work to do, and it's not going to stop, but it has to start. So I'm going to speak about the behavior in sports. One of my constituents recently wrote a book, a male hockey player who won the Stanley Cup for Boston Bruins, Nick Boynton. And reading his story, I guess maybe I'm naive, I didn't think it would happen to men, but it did. And he speaks about the abuse, and he speaks about the fact that it occurs. So we know that this occurs in women, but we need to also understand, how do we stop and educate coaches, both women and men, to ensure that they understand the importance of educating our children at a young age, so that this behavior does not continue into their adult life. What recommendations? I'm going to leave the question open to anyone that can answer for me, because I'm really concerned about, we have to stop it. We have to stop it at the young age, because if we don't, it'll just continue. So maybe Dr. Teresa can start with that.
Sure, thank you. And I appreciate the question. And I think one of the things we certainly have learned or has been exposed this summer is how institutionalized the coaching profession is with respect to hockey. For example, you have players who are now coaching young children who perhaps have engaged in sexual assaults, who have perhaps engaged in sexual harassment, sexism. We have this in hockey ability where someone retires from the profession as a good player, then they move into a different role as a coach without any accountability that was spoken to this morning. So I think what we need to first start with is before we even get to the education piece is to stop letting predators coach our kids. And I'll turn it over to Shannon.
I don't know, Allison, do you want to jump in? Because I feel like we've spoken a lot already.
Thank you, Shannon. I'd love to share a few thoughts. I think that in Canada, we actually have quite an asset compared to other systems in that we do have a national coach education system led by the Coaching Association of Canada and its PT partners. But I would say that most would agree that coach education in Canada has been really focused on the technical and the tactical aspects of sport. Really not a strong emphasis on the social emotional aspects of sport, the whole human, if you will, the whole human athlete. And while there have been excellent modules and training programs developed by groups like Respect in Sport, which of course is led by Sheldon Kennedy, an athlete who was abused by his coach, these have not been totally mainstreamed and normalized as mandatory coach education. We're moving there. But if we're talking about disruption, we have to go even further. And along with that, as everyone has said, there has to be checks and balances on behavior. If the coach is the ultimate authority over that daily training environment and there's no oversight on that, and it's a homogenous group of people, we know that diverse groups have greater checks and balances on behavior. And so if in that environment, everybody comes from that same lived experience and that same worldview, you're going to have way less in terms of those checks and balances.
Thanks so much. I'm now going to move over to Adam. Adam, 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And this is my first time on Status Women, so thank you very much for allowing me to join. Prior to coming to committee today, I was able to join virtually, and before I replaced MPC or will try to. I just want to thank all of the voices, all of the incredible people that came and joined today to share their experiences, and their testimony is so valuable. So I also want to acknowledge that the burden of truth and the burden of that testimony is so often held by strong women and exclusively women and victims, and that's something that needs acknowledging. That it takes a strong woman, but it's always women standing up against these things, and we need to call it what it is. The majority of the time, this is men's violence against women, not just violence against women, not just coach violence against women. This is men's violence against women. So, as a man on Status Women today, I want to make sure that's very, very clear. First, I would like to ask Dr. Fowler something. First, I'd like to thank you for saying something that I believe for a long time. I'm a huge proponent of funding sport for and through health. Could you elaborate on that a little bit for the benefit of the committee?
Sure. And I have to first say I am not a policy person. I understand policy only to spell it. But if you really think of the lens in research, we talk about lenses. How do we approach our work? And there's different lenses to how we engage with our study. For example, as a sociologist, I read the world a different way than perhaps a quantitative person would read the world a different way. And so when we think about why sports is in Canadian heritage portfolio, if you trace it back, it stems back to a failed Olympic run where the men's ice hockey team didn't achieve gold medals, right? And so therefore now we need to invest in this national idea that ice hockey is our game, it's our sport, which again, overrides our Indigenous history with respect to those sports that have been here before us. So when you think about the lens that sports is viewed through, from a funding, from whichever sort of lens, having it within heritage raises red flags, because what are we promoting as Canadian heritage?
Thank you, Dr. Fowler. You can count on me to be looking up quite a lot of your research in the coming days. I appreciate that testimony. My next question, and I only have about a minute, Ms. Sandmeyer-Graves, will be over to you. We met in 2017 when the then Minister of Sport asked us to be part of a working group, which has resulted in quite a lot of progress since, but needs to keep moving forward. Can you just give us a quick sort of your opinion, your views on the progress to date and what needs to continue to happen in order to continue to see progress?
I want to mention that it was actually a all-party or committee study of the Heritage Committee that really kicked a lot of that work off, and that led to an initial investment of $30 million in sport, of which a portion went to addressing gender-based violence. I think our organization, as the national voice and authority on this topic, we've seen a lot of progress. We've gone from talking about it to acting on it, which has been very positive. And over our 41-year history, the productivity of the last 5 years is noteworthy. But I think that it's all incremental. It's glacial in its pace, it seems, at times. And when you listen to the survivors speak, you realize that we're absolutely not moving fast enough. We're not being aggressive enough. We're not moving with enough urgency, and we're moving too much through an institutional lens. We need to put the athletes at the center of this and not move at the pace that institutions are comfortable with, move at the pace that society and these families and these athletes demand.
Thanks, Alison, and it's good to see you. I just wanted to close by saying thanks to Ms. Bailey for being an extraordinary voice and mentor for young Indigenous women in this country. You're awesome.
Okay, so we're rushing. Go ahead, Adrian. When I start getting up and dancing, that means we're done.
Okay, je vais aller I'll go quickly then. I have 1 minute. I will thank the witnesses. Perhaps we could continue after the vote. No? Okay. So, Ms. Sandmeyer-Gray, in 30 seconds, you talked about a podium in your opening remarks, and what would you have to add, and what would be the impact on today's study?
I'm very sorry. I missed part of the question in the translation. Would you repeat it?
You talked about à nous le podium, we have the podium. What do we need to remember from that program in the context of our study?
I understand. Own the podium. Own the podium is a major, major pot of money that is governed by a body called Own the Podium. It started with the Vancouver Olympics because we wanted to win lots of medals, and it continues today. It directs millions of dollars to our national sport organizations. It needs to direct that money with values in mind, not just medals. It is a major lever for us to use in creating change.
Alison, thank you so much. And to Leah, I apologize. We are down past zero. So I do have to before I lose my job from the committee members, I have to end the meeting today. On behalf of all of the members of the committee, I would really like to thank all of the witnesses for coming in. Thank you so much for bringing your testimony. As we've indicated, if there's any follow-up that you need to do, please reach out. Any concerns, please reach out to the chair or myself. We will see everybody Thursday from 3:30 till 5:30, and we're going to start on version 1 of our Indigenous study. Today's meeting is adjourned. Okay, Mark has adjourned it for us.